And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, from across the Louisiana plain, where we are expanding and developing the cause of constitutional conservatism, elevating the voice of constitutional conservative candidates across the state, and slowly but surely, day by day, draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is The State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for inviting us along for part of your day. We're so grateful to you for listening, for supporting us, for encouraging us, for your prayers. If you are looking for a way to support us this holiday season, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. And we'd also really appreciate it if you'd help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us and subscribe and share it. You can even share short clips rather than the full episodes from our YouTube and Rumble channels. And the links to those are always in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. Well, today we have with us someone who is a true gift to the state of Louisiana, a man of many talents who happens to be our resident election integrity expert, Dr. Randy Russ. Well, before we talk to Dr. Randy, let's get into the scripture of the day. It is Psalm chapter 42, verses 1 and 2. It says, "As the deer pants longingly for water brooks, so my soul pants longingly for you, O God. My soul, my life, my inner self thirsts for God, for the living God. When will I come and see the face of God?" And in this season, when we're purposing to turn our hearts to Thanksgiving, I've really been thinking that the natural progression from the act of Thanksgiving becomes a desire for deeper connection with God, for a taste of His presence, for a personal encounter with Him. It's like the act and process of giving thanks to God takes us back to the scene where He showed up for us and came through for us, and it causes us to want more. So let me encourage and challenge you today. Stir up Thanksgiving in your heart and watch how it makes you long for more of God. Watch as it causes a thirst and a desire to meet with Him in a fresh way and be revived and re-energized spiritually. Watch as Thanksgiving brings you into His presence and opens the way for you to meet with Him on a new and deeper level.
You know, Danielle, it's interesting that that's the scripture of today. It sort of carries over from the theme of our last episode, which is the theme of Thanksgiving. You know, and it's not just a word. It's not just a holiday. We truly should take some time to count in our hearts and minds the many things for which we have to be thankful, because that is what opens our heart to a deeper encounter to God when we become more aware of His presence. And as I said in the show the other day, you know, St. Paul said, when you have a need or when you have a desire or a concern, you approach the Lord in prayer and thanksgiving. So everything that we do in prayer begins with a heart of gratitude. And you're so right. It does open us up to a deeper encounter with God. That's very, very powerful. Today, we have Dr. Randy Russ with us, as you said, who has been on our show before, and few people really know more about the ins and outs of the election system, both in the U.S. and in Louisiana, than Dr. Russ. What a pleasure to have you with us, Doc. How are you today?
Hey, Chris, how are you? And Danielle, it's good to be back on. It's been a little while, and I couldn't agree more with a spirit of gratitude. And in our culture these days, it seems that many folks are driven by envy and jealousy and all kinds of negative emotions. And one of the things that I found, and the scripture confirms, is that when we count our blessings one by one, we have a better day and a better attitude, and we treat each other with respect. And that's in great need these days. So I'm thankful for you two and all of our patriots around the state who are listening and those who are traveling to go see their families. I'm just very grateful.
Ditto back to you as well. Dr. Russ, what are your thoughts on the election results this most recent cycle, specifically in the Secretary of State's race? Obviously, the State of Freedom, LeCag, you, and many others were supporting Brandon Trosclair in the Secretary of State's race. Disappointing that he did not prevail in that race, but what are your thoughts on the race generally? And do you believe that Nancy Landry, who did win that race, the Republican, is open to a lesser or greater degree to reforming our election system in Louisiana?
That's a great question. As you've said, many of us supported Brandon Trosclair, and I have to say that he did more in the last year because he started campaigning about this time a year ago. He was the first competitor in the race. He and also Lennar Whitney, who helped him with events and scheduling, our Republican National Committee woman, those two did more to advance the cause of election integrity in Louisiana in the last year than any two individual persons. And I don't say that to in any way discount y'all's work or the work of many patriots around the state, but they worked tirelessly. I believe he did 180 plus events, not to mention all the phone calls and emails and texts and personal encounters that he did around the state. And so I'm proud of him, proud of the campaign, and was privileged to go on some of those trips with him to North Louisiana, to Bayou Country, where Danielle is, and the reception was overwhelmingly positive. So we are not discouraged, and we are not giving up. We see some things in the results that we're currently looking into that give us some pause about the accuracy of the results, and I really can't say much more than that. But you all know that we have a team of analysts around the state and beyond that look into these matters, and so we're taking a look at the results of the Secretary of State race, not to contest the race, but we see some anomalies and patterns that we want to look into. And so we'll be talking about that as that information develops. We'll be going public with that. But for now, we accept the results. Nancy Landry is our Secretary of State. We pray for her, we support her, and we hope that she will be open to listening to the message that we have. Brandon and she interacted on the campaign trail. She is very well aware of his position for secure, serialized, hand-marked, hand-counted ballots. And we share a concern with Nancy about voter registration and our dirty voter rolls. So we do have a common objective there. She testified in the House Governmental Affairs Committee earlier this year that they themselves, the Secretary of State's office, had identified over 180,000 registered voters who were suspect and probably ineligible on our rolls. That's about 6% of the total voter registrations in the state. Our estimates are 600,000 from our research. And so we're hopeful that we can sit with her and figure out ways to make sure that no one is disenfranchised, point number one, but that ineligible and illegal voters are removed from the rolls, because that's one of the ways that voter fraud can happen, is those registrations can be used for nefarious purposes. And I know we're going to be talking about that coming up. So we support Nancy. We pray for her success. We think that hopefully we can work with her.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more regarding the yeoman's work that Lennar Whitney and Brandon did to raise public awareness for so many months as they did. And sometimes, life has taught us, history teaches that oftentimes when we plant seeds, it takes time for those seeds to germinate and to grow. And I would not be a bit surprised if the fruits of Brandon and Lennar's efforts and the efforts of many others in this campaign bear forth abundantly in the coming months and years because of that effort. It was so hugely important that he got the word out about the acute vulnerabilities in our system. And I applaud him for those efforts tremendously for what he did. And I'm sure that, again, that will bear fruit moving forward. Dr. Russ, let me ask you about this. The court, you had a couple of court cases in which Brandon, you, and others were plaintiffs challenging the voter rolls in Louisiana and on other issues. What is the status of those matters at this point?
We have one case that we filed back in early May, and that case had to do with ineligible and illegal voter registrations. That case was heard initially by a temporary judge who seemed favorable to us, and then he was replaced by a permanent judge here in East Baton Rouge Parish in the 19th Judicial District. And she unfortunately ruled, I believe in October, early October, that or late September, that the mandamus filing, and you're an attorney, so you know what mandamus is a speeded up process. And we filed under the mandamus rule because we wanted to try to be able to clean up the rolls in advance of our state election. Unfortunately, that ruling meant that case was dismissed, and so nothing happened. An interesting thing is we went up against 5 attorneys from the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General is the attorney of record for Registrar of Voters, and we went up against 2 outside attorneys representing the Secretary of State. So here we have Louisiana citizens paying out of our own pockets to do what is already required by law, that is to clean up the voter rolls. And between the Attorney General's office and the Secretary of State's office, they put 7 attorneys on the case against R1. And so
we get to double pay, too, for all those attorneys.
We're paying taxes to run our election system, and at the same time, we're having to pay attorneys to sue the state to do what is required under both federal and state law. So we're not finished yet because we wanted the election to go by, and we'll be coming back with some more activity to force the state to do what federal and state law requires it to do, and that is to maintain only eligible voters on the voter rolls. And again, we differ with the Secretary of State's office. You know, they're at 180 plus and we're at 600,000. So we tried to negotiate with them prior to filing the case, and they were not interested. We tried to negotiate during the case, and they were not interested. And so we're not done, and we're not going to go away. So we'll have more news on that in the days to come.
Great.
I find it, Dr. Russ, astounding, and I said this when we had you on the show before. I just find it astounding that you would have to file a lawsuit to get our public officials to do what the law already requires them to do, particularly in an area of such fundamental importance to the freedom of the republic. I just find that astounding.
One of the things, and I'll let a little cat out of the bag here, one of the things that we found in meeting with clerks of court around the state is that there is a law in our election code, section 178 or paragraph 178, that requires the clerk of court who sends out jury summons notices, and we've all received those, right, in the mail. Paragraph 178 requires the clerk of court to maintain a list monthly of all the return to sender. Those would be, people who have changed their address or undeliverable individuals. Those immediately are suspect as possible ineligible voters, right? Because they couldn't deliver the jury summons. Paragraph 178 requires the clerk of court to maintain a list and transmit that list to the registrar of voters. And the registrar of voters is then required, and this is black letter law, to follow up with those undeliverable addressees and determine their continued eligibility as a registered voter in the state of Louisiana. And that was something that we learned about on the campaign trail. Now, we're currently investigating that, but what I can say is that a very large parish indicated to us that they have not been maintaining, as required by 178 of the Louisiana Code, they have not been requiring those maintenance of the list, and they have not been transmitting those names to the registrar of voters. So if that is occurring statewide, and we have no reason to believe that it's not, then there is on the books a statute of how to keep the voter rolls clean. And again, we're already paying for it because we're paying the clerk of court to send out jury pool notices, and the clerk of court is getting the return to sender notices from the Postal Service.
And it certainly sounds like there's greater, stronger grounds even to challenge the numbers coming out of the Secretary of State's office about the questionable voters on the rolls. So I love that, and I would have every reason to believe that that's true. Especially if you see it one place, it would be shocking that you wouldn't see it others for the same reason.
Yeah, and the question is why. So why are the clerks of court? And again, I don't want to get too far ahead of our investigation, but why at least two that we know of are not doing their constitutional and statutory duty to keep the voter rolls clean. And the question is, why are they not doing it when we're already paying for it? It also begs the question of why did the state contract with Eric to supposedly clean up the voter rolls when we already had a procedure in law where the clerk of court cooperates with the registrar of voters to look into suspect voter registration.
So interesting.
Yeah. Dr. Russ, do we have any idea about numbers, without asking you to get too specific, about the numbers of jury summons that are being returned undeliverable in a given parish?
That's a great question, Chris. And I chuckle because I was sitting in a clerk's office in a parish that I will not name. And the clerk, I was with Brandon, and we were talking about election integrity. And the clerk pointed to a credenza behind Brandon and I. The clerk was at their desk. And the clerk said, you see that stack of mail back there? He said, I send out some number of hundreds of these things every month, and those are the returns from this month, and it's about 20% of the registered voters on our rolls. 20%.
Wow.
Now you heard the number 600,000 that we believe are suspect registrations in Louisiana from our research. We have 3 million registered voters in Louisiana. That's a round number. 600,000 is about 20% of our voter rolls. So we had a clerk confirm our research for us with a physical stack of mail right behind me.
That's amazing. And on that point, the low election turnout, do you think that's reflective of the fact that 20% of the voters aren't actually voters? I mean, maybe turnout's not as bad as we think it is.
Yeah, I think that's one issue is dirty voter rolls reduce perceived voter turnout. I won't call it voter turnout, it's perceived voter turnout. Because if you reduce the denominator, I know I'm getting into math, if you reduce the 3 million to 2.4 million, which is minus 600,000, right? If you have a denominator of 2.4 million, the turnout jumps substantially.
It makes a lot of sense to me because the people at the polls, the poll workers, when I visit, seem to think that turnout is just fine. And then you see the numbers and you're like, well, this doesn't make any sense at all. Why is the report, the verbal report of the poll workers who are physically there, completely different from what shows up on the Secretary of State website? Very fascinating. So, in terms of the outcomes of this election cycle, Dr. Russ, it sounds like you're seeing some irregularities. We saw, for instance, in the Caddo sheriff's race where one candidate won by a single vote and they're calling for a recount. How in the world do you have a recount of a machine vote, and what do you think is going to happen there?
Well, this is case one in our argument. Is Louisiana's election system, has the results of our elections have never been audited because they cannot be audited. And that's not me saying it. If you go to the Legislative Auditor's Election Integrity Report, March of 2022, on page 5, what I just said is documented. And we cannot audit it because there is no paper trail. And wait for this. They also pointed out that the only place that we can conduct a hand count audit is with the approximate 10% of mail-in ballots, which are absentee ballots, which, as you all know, are paper ballots. But guess what? For some reason, the state of Louisiana has never conducted a hand count of the mail-in ballots. And again, that's not me saying this. This is the legislative auditor. So in Caddo Parish Sheriff's race, this is proof point number one of why we need serialized, secure, hand-marked paper ballots that are counted at the precinct level by registered voters in that precinct of both parties and independents and so on. Right now, they cannot resolve that because they can only hand count and audit 10% of the votes which came in. And I don't know what the exact count was in Caddo of the mail-in ballots. So don't take 10% to the bank, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood. So you have 90% of the votes in the Caddo Parish Sheriff's race that absolutely cannot be verified. And therefore, those two candidates are stuck. And what it does in Caddo and around the state is it destroys confidence in our election system.
Is there a way to sue for an audit in a race like this? Like, is it legally required that we have an audit, even though we know that we are the only state in the nation to not have auditable elections?
Well, that's one of the outcomes from this situation, that one of the candidates may sue on those grounds. And what we've tried to do for over 2 years is look at the software to determine if it's accurately counting the votes. And we know from other states that it's not. Elections have been overturned based on the paper hand count. And we know from CISA and the Election Assistance Commission that this software is highly vulnerable and prone to mistakes. So that's one thing that a candidate could do, and it wouldn't be a contest because the contestation limit is 9 to 10 days. It would be a suit which would allege, for example, what's going on in Georgia in the Curling versus Raffensperger case. Citizens are alleging that the electronic voting systems are denying them their constitutional rights, and maybe we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. Dr. Russ, now, as far as being able to audit the elections in Louisiana, one of the reasons why the elections are not really auditable is because it's still the black box, the software deep inside these machines really is still legally inaccessible even to election integrity experts because it's still considered proprietary information. Is that right?
That's correct. So we have our votes are counted in a black box software, as you say, by contract with the outsourced vendor, Dominion. That software is patented, proprietary, and unavailable for public inspection. And that brings us to the Louisiana State Constitution, Article 11, Section 2, which Article 11 is for elections. Section 2 says ballots shall be counted publicly, and we've talked about this before. Well, here in Caddo Parish, the votes were not counted publicly. They were counted by black box proprietary patented software. And so we think that there's a constitutional issue here, and maybe our good friends in Caddo Parish will bring a lawsuit to challenge the machines based on the fact that they do not comport with the Constitution. And our research shows that no one has ever challenged this before.
Yeah.
I would love to see that suit, because I think the way that they look at this probably is that the media is reporting the numbers. Well, the media is not an official. The officials need to be the citizens themselves. So separating that out, the media should be reporting, not like the original, basically not being the original counter, so
Correct.
to speak, or aggregator of those numbers.
Correct.
The people should be the aggregators.
That's correct.
Absolutely. Other than with regard to a lawsuit in Caddo and possibly other lawsuits, Dr. Russ, is there a venue in the legislature? We've had a couple of guests on who were recently elected, and one incumbent who was reelected, who talked about addressing some of these issues legislatively. We're certainly prepared to move forward on that front if possible. Is that a viable option to move forward and try to rectify some of this in the state legislature?
Absolutely. The United States Constitution gives exclusive purview over elections to state legislatures with congressional involvement for federal elections, with some congressional involvement. So state legislatures have enormous power, and there are suits going on right now that even the governor, it's questionable whether a governor can veto election laws passed by a legislature. And those are open, that's being debated right now. But we're in a good position with Jeff Landry as our governor, Liz Muriel as our attorney general, and Nancy Landry as our secretary of state, and the good work that's been done to elect constitutional conservative legislators. I'm very optimistic that we can get some things done in the legislature. We gave all of our research and analysis and evidence January of this year to a team of 3 attorneys from Jeff Landry's office. So they're well aware of what we have done and what we have seen. And we also met with Liz Muriel probably early last summer and briefed her on the issues. And so we're optimistic about it. Let me give you an example of something that could be done legislatively on the voter registration side. Our basic principle is to return power to the people in each parish and precinct. Centralized election administration has been an experiment for about 20 years, and I would say that it has failed because 2/3 of American citizens lack confidence in our election system. This is Rasmussen poll and Harvard Harris polling. And they believe that election officials are ignoring the problems. So the public is with us on this. In Louisiana, the registrar of voters is appointed by the parish council or police jury, which is a good thing because local folks make that appointment. The bad news is the parish council can't fire the registrar of voters for malfeasance or corruption. The Board of Election Supervisors at the state level, which is the Secretary of State, the Director of Elections, the Clerk of Court, President of the Association, the Registrars Association, and a governor's appointee, are the ones who investigate and can hire and fire the registrar of voters. We think that there's an opportunity to return that power of accountability to the parish council, that if citizens identify malfeasance like what I was just talking about with the clerk of court, paragraph 178, then that local body, based on the evidence that they are given by citizen groups with proper, backup, they could then sanction or, in fact, remove that registrar of voters, and it would not have to go to Baton Rouge to be done.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, we are prepared absolutely to move forward on that front in the legislature. And as you said a few minutes ago, Dr. Russ, with the current governor, Jeff Landry, Liz Muriel as Attorney General, and the good new crop of legislators in both the House and the Senate, particularly in the Senate, we are very optimistic about being able to get some good things done there. I want to thank all our listeners today, Danielle, for joining us for part one of a two-part series with Dr. Randy Russ. I also want to, as always, thank our listeners and subscribers and supporters across the state for just that, for continuing to support and subscribe and share the State of Freedom as we continue to revolutionize the way political advocacy is done in the state of Louisiana. Could not be more thankful.
And we know that this podcast is only growing in popularity and growing in numbers because of the work of our listeners who have been with us from the beginning and those who have joined us along the way. So thank you so much for that. If you'd like to support us financially, you can do that at freedomstate.us or P.O. Box 861 in Berg, Louisiana, 70343. And as a reminder, you can also support LeCAG and the work we're doing to get out the pressure, get out the word about any calls to action, legislatively or otherwise. And Chris, how can people support LeCAG?
www.lacag.org. Click Give and then join us, and $22 a month helps us to continue to build our infrastructure, get out our calls to action, and continue to elevate the voice of constitutional conservatism and hold our legislators accountable for their fidelity to the citizens of Louisiana. And we are so deeply, deeply thankful for your continued support.
Yes. And as you've said so many times, Chris, we've got a state to save. So that's what we're here doing. That's what we're trying to do right alongside each and every one of you. So we're so thankful for you. And before we let you go, I'd like to mention an opportunity for any listener who may already be investing in precious metals, interested in investing in precious metals, or even starting a home-based business in that industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, which is actual dealer cost. They're beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees, no minimums, and you can refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income as well. If you're just interested in purchasing metals, you can visit metalstacks.com/DWalker. And if you're interested in learning about the business aspect of Metal Stacks, please email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us. It's a really great company, and it is also growing by leaps and bounds.
Go to Metal Stacks. You will never lack. Danielle, we are moving forward at a rapid pace. We are continuing to expand, continuing to elevate our voice, and each day continuing to take steps to preserve the great state of freedom in Louisiana.
God bless you, Chris. Thank you.
You as well.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to The State of Freedom, LLC at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.